Yes, I was born in my grandparents' home at 12 Cunjee Street, Aberdare, and then when I was about 3 the family moved over to Alexander Street in West Cessnock, where I grew to the age of 21, at which time I was married, and then I moved up to higher in West Cessnock than that, into Desmond Street, and during that time I began a job at Belbird Colliery, of course, as an electrical fitting apprentice, and after which, when I became an electrician, I've worked at a number of mines, but yeah, so I grew up always been a Cessnock boy.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so what school did you go to?
I went to the West End Infants, and then the primary, and then the old original Cessnock High School.
And so your time working in the coal industry, the mining industry,
Yeah.
how long were you doing that type of work for?
I worked maximum time, apart from compensable time off as such, which is 44 years.
Yeah.
From the age of 16, which was the minimum age of starting, up till the fact that I turned 60. And of course at that particular time it was in the Act, Coal Mining Act, caused people to retire. You had to retire at 60. My father did, grandfather, and I did. But nowadays that's not the go.
No.
Well, the first thing that caused me to think of another job apart from electricity, because in those days it was a fair bit of manual labour involved, in an underground experience, of course, was the fact that on the 3rd of August 1960 at Belbird Colliery I was struck in the back by 4 full skips, 1 tonne of coal in each, and they were doing 80 miles an hour when they hit me, and then the first skip then ran over me and caused me quite a lot of damage. So I found the fact that they'd hit me in the back at 80 miles an hour, which I didn't feel because I'd fainted when I saw them coming, caused me to have a bad back for quite a number of years. Fortunately now I don't suffer very often with bad back, but wondered whether I could continue dragging the boring units around on coal-strewn ground and so forth underground. So I left Belbird Colliery and went to Northern Rhondda Colliery, where I met a fellow called Vic Ash, who was an excellent photographer still. He didn't do movies, and he sort of took me under his wing and mentored me and told me to go and buy a 6x6 enlarger at Novak's Camera Company. And so I went down and paid £39.12 for a Auchmuty Library 6x6, and then he said, now you'll need a good camera. I had a RedNet 1A, which is a Kodak product. So he said, I want you to go now and buy a Rolleicord 5B, which is 2 1/4 square neg, and then we'll get you set up in developing and printing and stuff. Now all this happened underground. I never attended his home, he never came to my home, just showed me what to do, what to buy, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
So I found that the first job that I did was a ball in Cessnock, and of course changing film after every 12 shots in the Rolleicord wasn't a real good thing. People waiting on and snickering and so forth, so pardon me. I then bought a Leica M2 with a M2 body with a 2.8 f2.8. It was 50mm, I think, the focal length lens. It gave me the ability to shoot 36 frames instead of 12, which was pretty good. And a Braun EF3 flash gun, £55, and I was into it. So I just started to shoot friends' children originally. Bought a few Argophoto BM floodlights, which were the go at the time. Made up some holders and stuff, and did a bit of studio work with the children. and gave the folks the photographs, of course. But one day a lovely girl asked me if I could do her wedding. So I said, yeah, I'll have a go. So I ended up employing 4 other photographers, and I had 4 colorists. So the business grew. They were intermittent work, of course.
Yeah.
If I had one wedding booked, I'd do that wedding. Yeah. And if I had 2 booked, well, I'd employ one of the other 4 to do the thorough job. Yeah. Because my wife and I were married, and the company who did which did our photography did just smatterings of photography, and we weren't happy about that. So I used to go to the bride's home before she left, and I'd be with her till she left in the going away gear. One day, with some friends, we visited a pub in Cessnock in the main street, and the publican had recently bought, when he went over to the island, Norfolk I think, a camera for me, which is an Assay Pentax SV, which I'd always wanted. Of course I had the Leica for some time, which was a wonderful camera. But it appeared that when he bought the camera for us, he bought one for my father as well, and got them quite reasonably. So I was sort of owned by him, for him having done the favour. So this particular day, when my friends and I walked into the pub, he brought over the local newspaper, opened to a page and started to tap this thing and said, read that and apply. So I said, well, having read it, was NBN 3 require the photographer in the Cessnock region to shoot news and roving eye and stuff. So I said, look, I'm unable to do this job. Not that I don't know how to shoot movies, I've done a bit of home stuff, but I haven't the time. I work at the mine, and I do my other private photography as well at home of an evening. So he looked at me, and I said, and as well as that, they don't supply the camera. I'd have to own a camera. So within minutes, I found a Bell and Howell GB627 coming down the bar at me. He'd put it on the bar and tapped it, away she came. And when I picked the thing up, it was such a beautiful instrument that I said, okay, I'll apply. So I did, and when I rang NBN, they said that there'd been another photographer employed, mainly because of his still work, which he had taken and showed them. But we've given him a camera, he's so good. So with you having a camera, you can start as well, but we'll try you both out. So after a short period of time, they'd given both of us a job. Then I received a phone call from NBN saying, we want you to go out to this fellow's place, ask him for the camera and any film stocks that remain, and bring them back to the studio. You're the bloke. So between the two of us, I apparently did the better job, possibly, I don't know that, but I would assume that. So anyway, from then on I was employed by NBN 3. Hey. Very, very happy to be so, quite unhappy at home when I had to go and do a job, and the kids were needing to go to cricket. I didn't enjoy any of that because of the photographic experience. Yeah. My wife did that. Yeah,
what year was that, Barry?
It would have been toward the end of 1965 that he gave me this Bell and Howell to use, the publican, because I remember I rang. It proved not to be the best camera for the job. I think someone said to me it was designed, and the apertures and so forth were designed for colour work, not black and white. Now, whether that was a fact or not, I don't know. But I rang Jan Novak, with whom I dealt, photographically of course, and I asked him if he had a Payload Bolex H16S in stock, and he said no, there is one on a boat up near Brisbane. When it comes to Sydney, I'll get it off for you, and it'll cost you £301. So I asked him to get that camera for me, and he sent it up to the Maitland railway station where I went to pick it up, and then of course the account arrived and it was $437 with the change from down to decimal having happened.
Yeah.
So I then started to use the GLAMx, and it was a better camera for the job. And of course, I don't think I was ever A-grade cinematographer, but I used to try, and I think the chap in the editing room did a marvellous job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what I did at the time, Arnott's, the biscuit company, presented a program at 8:30 on NBN each evening, each weekday evening, and it was called Roving Eye. So, of course, gymkhanas, other competition, you know, wood chopping, motorsports and so forth, anything that happened in the Cessnock region. And my region was bounded by Wollombi to the west. To the south I could go to Quarraballong, Head and Greeter, because my neighbour Athol Dombrain, neighbour in filming, he took over at that town and went down through Maitland. But the other way I went out to North Rothbury and he covered Branxton. So we knew our area, and then NBN of course would only send us to those areas to save any hassle. But so the Roving Eye was just more or less film to make people who were interested in television and their town acquainted with the fact that there'd been a Roving Eye cameraman at the Gymkhana, and this is what he'd shot. And then there was the news items, you know, if there'd been a theft and broken doors and stuff, they'd send me to that. I did one documentary on winemaking out of Tyrrell's Vineyards with just black and white, no sound. I had to write the story, and of course as we shot we'd use write a shot list, and that provided to the editor would be very helpful, of course. So news items, Roving Eye, and then of course getting away from the filming, NBN then rang a promotion called Tele-Treasure. The idea was that employees, possibly more people than I know, from the studio went out, and of course each of the stringers were employed to do this. So what would happen would be I'd get home from work around 4 o'clock from the coal mine, and Brian Newman would ring me and say, now I want you to drop 2 keys off to so-and-so in Cessnock, go to East Cessnock then and do another 2. And I used to drop off about 6 per evening, and there were criteria involved in the fact that firstly I had to see signs of television viewing, which meant an antenna, not essentially nowadays of course. The other thing was that there had to be a light on so that I didn't wake people from night shift or whatever. And then I had to just go and knock on the door and ask if they were viewing television, and if they're on NBN, if they've just seen the last television question, the Tele-Treasure question. And the difference in facial expression from these people was wonderful. You know, those people who thought, what the hell are you doing here? And those, oh joy, you know. Yeah. So I'd offer them a choice of a key. The only one who ever was given a key was the last recipient of a key in that lot. And I used to deliver 50 in that particular period. Ken Stone, the manager, who was manager when I started, he did the first Tele-Treasure in Cessnock, and then of course having started I did those after. But and then we gave them 30 shillings as well, 3 crisp brand spanking new 10 shilling notes, and the idea of that was so that they could get themselves to the studio to try the key that I'd given them in each of the locks. So then of course the judging day would occur, they'd all file in, and the first one that was done with Ken Stone was a Volkswagen car, was the first, the pointed ended one. It was the first prize. But yeah, so I enjoyed doing that too. It was a little antiquated back in those days. I remember when I shot a story, this particular documentary, it took all day to shoot it. I shot about 700 feet of film. I think there were 3 of Tri-X, which is the fast film for light, and the other was Plus X, which was outside stuff. So then I unfortunately got grape juice on my trousers, which cost 7 and 6 to have dry cleaned. A bit of perspiration fell onto one of the Argophoto BM lights that I was using inside, which when the sweat hit it broke open, and then the filament of course exploded and burnt my arm. Cost me 36 shillings to buy the new globe, and anyway the outcome of that was that I had to then go home and write the story, given that I had the shot list already written, and then get it down to NBN. If it was a newsworthy thing, I would drive it down, and they paid, I think it was 35 cents a K or something. I used to often take a film down and come home, and they'd pay more for the travel than the job. Didn't matter how much time it took me to do the job. So anyway, then if it wasn't something that had to go on news, well then I'd take it down at around 11 or 12 o'clock at night to Rover Motors bus depot, where I would seek out the old bus cleaner, a chap, Taff Jones I think his name was, and hand him the film and 2 shillings, which later would become 20 cents of course, but the two shillings was for the purpose of the Rover Motors making a couple of bob on delivering the film to the BHP gates, because in those days of course the coal mining industry was closing down in that area, and the people were being involved in the steelworks employed by them, and of course there were, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 buses went from Cessnock, Rover Motors buses, down there. So they would then, Taff would give the film to the chap who was driving the bus, plus the 2 bob of course. Then it would be delivered to the gates, it'd be given to the gatekeeper or the watchman. So the following morning I'd ring NBN and I'd say that footage is over at the BHP gates, and they'd send someone over from Mosbury Crescent to pick it up. So they'd get the shot list, the story and the footage, and have to process it and edit it and so forth.
So you really had to do everything yourself, like being, I guess, isolated in the region. Did you have much support from NBN or other colleagues, the other stringers? Was it? No,
we were each his own. I remember there was a fellow at Foster who did that area. He was a school teacher. There was a Mr. Allen in the Muswellbrook district. Of course, the ornithologist Athol Dornbrain was in Maitland, and I did the Cessnock run. So no one was ever asked to help the other. The only job that I ever did where a studio photographer came up, and it was Barry Nancarrow who came, was a burning building in Curry. So he had to come from Newcastle, of course, and I had to come from Cessnock. But we shot the job and it ended up on the news and everyone was happy. But that was the only time I think I worked for them for around 8 years. Many memorable ones. I remember I was sent out to the Quarrabulong State Forest one time because one of the last existing bullock teams was being employed to pull a huge log onto the back of a timber jinker. And so of course there were probably half a dozen folk there, but the old bloke, Les Avery by name, he had the bullocks, and the idea was that they drove the truck alongside the log, and then Les made up his team on the other side of the truck, and they made ramps from other logs that they'd cut so that the log would roll up these two logs. And he rolled his rope around and around and around so that when his bullock team moved, the log would roll up onto the back of the jinker. So that was a good story because it was a roving eye, because it was a story about how people, you know, get logs on the backs of jinkers. Yeah. But many memorable jobs I did. I once found that they were repetitious a little in getting me to go out of the rifle club at Cessnock. In fact, normally, you know, if you had a job to do for some group, they'd probably get one roving eye or news. But the riflemen used to get them quite regularly. Probably half a dozen times in my 8 years did I go out there, but just, you know, general things. But I became quite a firm friend of Col Joy, and the reason that had occurred, a fellow working at NBN, Barry Brady, used to ring and give me some jobs, and this particular job was the finalists in the Blind Date program that showed, I think it was on, it might have been on ABC, I think it was on another channel. Anyway, they'd end up with a coach full of folk who had won, so that over a period of time they'd amass this group, and then the group would be chaperoned by a celebrity, and in this particular case Col Joy. So it was, they were treated to a tour of the vineyard, and primarily to McWilliam's wines, where I had to go with the camera and shoot the coach arriving and so forth. So Cole jumped off and he said, "There's a lady on here with clothing that we mightn't want on TV." So he said, "I don't want you to shoot her." So I said, "Fair enough, that'll happen. I won't do that, Cole." And so during that period of time, he and I spoke to each other. You know, he was a wonderful man, lovely bloke, and we just had a fond friendship. Yeah. So I met him a number of times since at various places, not jobs, but saw him once at Hamilton, and of course he came over and shook my hand and said, "How you going, Barry?" Gee, that's magic. But one of the other very interesting things was, I think Jeff Greaves in this case asked me to go and shoot a job out at McWilliam's, and it was to do with the making of the movie Squeeze a Flower, Squeeze a Grape. And it starred Walter Chiari, Jack Albertson, Steve Allen, and a host of Australian actors. So when I went out, I found that the director was a chap who had been directing, Mark Daniels was his name, and he was directing Mission Impossible. So the chap who met me at the gate took me over and Mr. Daniels, this fellow's from NBN3 and would like to shoot a bit of footage around as we're filming. Is that possible? So he turned around in his director's chair and said, "Does that thing make a noise?" And I said, "Oh, slightly." "Well, make sure it doesn't," he said. So that was, yes, he can film, but don't do anything rash. So I had a wonderful day with that.
Yeah, when was that film made, Barry?
Oh dear. It would have been in the, probably toward the mid-60s or later 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of the date, but it was a wonderful experience for me because it showed me how they set up, you know, the little train tracks upon which the camera rolled, and all the carbon arc lighting they had and all those sorts of things. And then of course the chap running around with a light meter, trying to match this, like if you get cloudy weather of course you've got to match the shot before this shot so that the light conditions have got to be the same. So if a cloud comes over, you've got to hold everything. People go and have a drink, and then the cameraman yells out, "Okay," and back they come. It exhilarated me. I often wondered whether it would be good to seek a job at the studio to try and get better at it. I don't consider that I was an A-grade cinematographer, but I love to do the job and I love to watch it, of course, but the editor always made a good film from my work, and you know, watching it I could see where he'd sort of shuffled the shots a little bit to make it better, because I'd never been tutored in that. Just sort of grew on, you know, you'd shoot a shot of the assigned to let people know, just an impactful thing, well, okay, this is going to be Cessnock or Western or Abermain or whatever. And then, of course, you know, just shoot your shots with the cutaways between them and so forth, and it was wonderful. Yeah. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Not a lot. I don't recall more now, of course, on the internet. People are speaking about the memory of me being there, you know, but at the time it was sort of a matter-of-fact thing. I remember Milton Morris was asked to come up and open the new and only set of traffic lights in Cessnock. So I was asked by NBN3, of course, to go and shoot that job. So I remember I waited for 20 or 30 minutes, as did the crowd, and there were probably about 50 or 60 people waiting. So of course he was late, hopped out of the car, and of course I started the film and shot the job. But all he did was just turn a key and on they went, and people clapped, and that was it. You know, a little short thing like that, more newsy than roving eye-ish. Yeah. But another one I remember back when Cessnock was had been manual telephones up till then, of course, with an exchange, and then NBN again, of course. Just they used to select the jobs. So down we went, or I went down, and 6 o'clock I think it was, they changed over, and had lighting with me. Filmed the ceremony, just a couple of blokes who were working for PMG at the time. I don't think it was Telecom, I think it was PMG then. But anyway, they pulled out the links that allowed the automation to occur, and that was that. So that was more or less a news type job. Well, you know, I mean, we don't, of course NBN or the studio, whichever, would send the folk, the cameraman and his crew, or whatever. I know that ABC used to send a crew of folk, and of course NBN sent me, but and I had to do the lights and all the stuff. But nowadays, I mean, the technology is wonderful. I don't know how to use it all, any of it much. In fact, I've just bought a mobile phone because it doesn't work out where I live out in the mountain at Mount View, and we didn't find a need to have one. But you know, if you're carrying in the car and you break down, well then they're probably handy. But you know, that's only a very basic sort of a thing. But in regard to photography, my first digital camera was a Nikon D80, and then because I had two lenses I bought another body so that I didn't have to change the lenses much, and then I switched to Canon, and I bought a 60D and then a 70D, and now I've got a 5D Mark III, and you know, I love using them, love it, because of course you know, in the old days you had to carry a bag with some film in it. Like the day I shot the documentary, I had, as I said, 700 feet of film, and nowadays you can put a USB in, like a card, memory card, and of course you you could do a world trip on one card. But I don't. The question you asked was about the regional sort of photography. I suppose what they'd do, they'd either send a helicopter, it was extremely important, or send a couple of chaps up in a motor car, you know. But it was just a diverse set of jobs that I did. I just can't speak highly enough about, you know, the fact that NBN employed me, put up with me, sent me to these jobs, and the experience that I got was magic. Yeah. Well, the fact that, and I've no doubt that it's archival footage. Now, I don't know that they'd destroyed it, but one of the jobs that I did that I enjoyed so much and felt so inadequate doing it was the reenactment at Wollombi for the bicentenary. I just forget the year that was on there, but I went out there to shoot the job. The well-known author Stan Parks, he was part of the history side of Cessnock. So I just asked Stan and an old school teacher of mine, Ken Maheen, they were both together, asked them what's going to happen today. So they said, oh, there's a group of folk over the back of the mountain there, they're just coming, walking over the hill, and they'll all end up down here in the common with us. A few church services happening. Well, it was much more than that. I think there was a little bit of choreographing going on because there were things that happened, and of course, unfortunately, every time these things were happening, I was winding up my blessed camera because I didn't know the program. And there was the folk had bullocks and horses and carts and drays and sulkies and things all in this procession. And of course, they had a couple of Aborigines tied up with rope, one of whom escaped. So then one of the chaps levelled this old musket at him, and of course, while I'm winding up, I could see the puff of smoke, and of course that happened once. I missed it. So my inadequacy was building. So when I went back up into the town, a group from ABC had arrived, and I think there were about 4 young men. And I sort of not teamed up with them, but I walked around with them for a while. I learned that they had a new Pathy camera, 16mm camera. I think the sound equipment was brand new as well. It was Integra, and the shots that they were shooting and were those shots that professional people do, that I wouldn't, in a little bit of nervousness and, you know, sort of a bit taut, I wouldn't have thought of them. So I thought, what a wonderful job these folk are doing. Well, unfortunately, the Pathy camera didn't work, nor did the sound equipment. So whatever footage I shot scooped the pool. And the group from Wollombi, the Historical Society there, they purchased a copy from NBN, and then they invited me out to see it. So that was a bit of the friends of the photographer, sort of. I mean, none of them probably knew me, but they invited me out to watch the footage, which I enjoyed very much. Yeah. I remember I was so interested in NBN and television, and particularly the job that I had with them, that I went down for the first Telly Treasure, the judging, let's say. So where these folk filed past these half a dozen chests and tried the key that the tea men had given them to find out if they'd won a prize. They're monetary prizes too. There was a 20 and a 10 and a 5 or something. But anyhow, I got to talk to Warwick Teese and, you know, Barry Brady and a heap of blokes. So it was suggested that why don't we see these other blokes? Only you come down to the studio. I said, well, I'd love to meet them. So they said, why don't we have a cabaret? So let's for the moment go out to Newcastle, South Newcastle Leagues Club. We'll have a beer and a talk. So Warwick Teese and Barry Brady and I and about half a dozen other blokes from the studio all went out, and then it was discussed about what we could do at a cabaret, and then each of those stringers would be invited to attend. And of course none of whom did, unfortunately, because I'd have loved to have met them. Alan McGurvan, he was a radio announcer, a disc jockey at 2KO, and Alan did a job at NBN for the first. He must have been employed for them. I don't really know all. Like, I mean, he was a disc jockey at KO, but whether he came over to NBN for a short time every day or not, I don't know. But anyhow, he made up this footage of all the mistakes that had been made, which was funny, of course, the bloopers. And at that first cabaret, the lights were dimmed, and of course the bloopers were shown, and he was acclaimed, and I became very friendly with Alan at that point. He was sitting with my wife and myself, and I remember I went one night to, I'd been to NBN Studios, I think, and on the way back I called into KO, got through the little door at the front on Hunter Street and up the stairs, and there was Alan waiting on Malcolm T. Elliott to take over from him. And Malcolm T. was very late, and I know Alan wasn't happy. But yeah, so, you know, that was another chap who I got to know quite well. Of course, NBN, it was broadcast over a wide range, quite an area, but as far as I knew, you know, there was the chap Webster at Muswellbrook, who I thought was Alan, and the fellow from, and I would imagine Taree, I think he was based at Foster, but he would have done the Taree run. Yeah. He was a school teacher whom I never met. I heard of him, and then of course when they, of an evening at 8, they'd normally put about 3 different segments on, so there'd be 3 different bits of film from 3 different towns, and they would say, now, photographer Barry Howard shot this at the Jim Carter on so-and-so just as a lead in, and then the footage would be shown. But I just, you know, those names escape me, and it's not improbable that they were after me. And I think it was Warwick Teese who was, well, the late Warwick Teese, unfortunately. He initiated the idea because he said to me, he said, "You're the only bloke we ever see." He said, "You're interested enough to come down." And I was so interested, I couldn't have stayed away. But anyway, he said, if we get these other stringers lined up, get them all together. Of course, all the folk from NBN were there, and it was held at the South Newcastle Leagues Club. So, just didn't happen. But as far as I knew at the time, Anne, you know, there was the Mr. Webster from Muswellbrook, the school teacher from Foster area, Athol, and myself.
NBN.
I don't know the year. It can be. I reckon I worked for them for 8 years. But disappointingly, the book that I was given when I started work with them was an artist pay advice slip book. And of course in it the pages were duplicated, so I would write Tyrrell's Vineyard, they'd know the job of course, underneath film used, 7 rolls of so-and-so, film stocks remaining, I'd have to go into the wardrobe and count the stock, put that down, time taken, which didn't matter much because it was only £3 a job, and then travel. So, and the date, of course. So that was a history that I did 101 jobs all up for NBN. I did 1 wedding bells, which was a thing, shot of a wedding. I did one romper room out at, I think it was Tyrrell's where I went to do that, could have been McWilliams, one of the first Miss Anns or Miss Kims or whatever. But the remainder of them were news stories and roving eye. So I think it was 8 years, and I started with them in the latter part of 65. Yeah. I did miss it after a point, although the getting away from that and to be able to do family things as much as I could, because I was still a professional photographer, weddings and things, you know. But the reason for me leaving NBN3 was the fact that one day a fellow rang and he said, I want you to go and do a job on the weekend, on Sunday at 3 o'clock or whatever, and it's a such and such at the showground. So I said, and has Jeff Greaves left? He said, no. He said, I work at the Eagle in Cessnock Eagle. But he said, Jeff and I are old friends in the journalistic side of things, and he's giving me a couple of jobs to do for a few extra pennies. Is he? So I said, right. You can't do the job? He said, no. I said, well, it won't be done because I won't be doing it. I do not play second fiddle to anyone. So on the Monday morning I rang Jeff, and he was very, very apologetic because we'd known each other and, you know, been good friends for quite a long time. And anyhow, I said, I'm not in your employ anymore, that's me finished. So I quit. I threw my own notice in as such, but I said, if you want anything done ever that you can't get done, it's a bit of an emergency, I'll do it for no pay. Do it for something for you, you know. But yeah. Oh, I'd have, given that I was youthful, not 80, I'd do it again. I'd have done that again, yeah, my word. Yeah, there are so many jobs that I remember having done, you know. One Sunday morning I awoke, and I think I awoke at the telephone. It was my sister-in-law who said, there's snow on Mount View. Now I lived at West End at the time, West Cessnock, and she was out at Bellbird, and of course she looked out the window and there's the snow on Mount View. So I thought, oh dear, my NBN would love this. So I rang Murray Masterton, who was my ultimate boss. He was news editor at the time, lived at Spears Point, had his number, so I rang, and I said, "There's my sister-in-law reports there's snow on Mount View, Murray. Do you want me to get a bit of footage of it?" "Oh, crikey, yes," he said. So with that I loaded the Bolex up and drove out. Actually, the first thing I did was put the triple turret on a telly and shot the top of Mount View from the back of my home, actually. And so then I got in the car and I went out around the Country Way area where it was so deep. But the snow had fallen all around the area. Tumblebee and, you know, it was everywhere. The blokes from the studio were all dispatched to shoot the snow. So there's a very well-known family, Crawford, who are normally synonymous to Country Way. So I looked up the book and found a Crawford number and rang, and fortunately I got onto an older Crawford who had been a businessman, like in the town, I think, in the area, with the post office. He said, yes, we ran the post office here, and he said, in my memory, never seen snow, and he said, I don't ever recall any of my family, the oldies, grandfather, father, ever having mentioned it. So that would have been, and it was 65, I think. I think it was 65. Around, I've got the date at home, but I just haven't.
But just ideal that you were in the area, you could capture it. And
Oh yes, well, we'll see. On the news that evening, I got a little bit of footage on, but the majority of it was down around Newcastle. So it was very widespread. Oh, I know about the Aborigines. Yeah, Stan Parks Stan Parks told me two stories, but apart from, and I missed the thing in the reenactment, as I said, when I was winding up the camera. That had been battery operated. I'd have been right, but it was wind up. But yeah, so Stan was the principal at the Millfield School, and there was a rock in the front. It was inset into the path leading to the school, and he wondered what the devil it was doing there. You know, what it was synonymous to or whatever. And it led him into, I think, more even possibly started him off on this historic adventure, where he learned that his wife was a product of civil servants, which he'd not known before, and went up to the New England district, where a lot of people from our area, Cessnock, Wallamby, Country Way, had left long ago and gone to, and created a whole new sort of local establishment up there. But anyway, this he told me that they got, I think it was £6 of flour, 2 blankets per annum, and they'd go to the Wallamby courthouse to receive that. Because what happened about the fire at Abermain was such that it was just voluminous in the sky. My wife and her mother and I and our 2 kids went to, I think it was a primary school thing where the kids were dancing or something. Anyway, they're their boys. Anyway, when we took Nell home, she lived on an elevated block in Bellbird, where when I got out, walked out the veranda and I looked down, here's Abermain light, more or less, Suez Gully area. The fire had grown. So I thought, well, you know, you're always looking for a story, and so I rang the studio. No, I think I rang Murray Masterton. And I said that, firstly I rang the police station at Abermain. And the lady answered the phone. She said, oh yes, in a nervous way. My husband and another chap are out looking at that and trying to organise things about that. The lady said to me, she said, I'm so very worried about my husband. If the wind changes, he reported, no toy phones of course, said he told me that if the wind changes, it'll take out about 3 homes. So, but she said he's in the fire area, you know, and I'm so worried. So anyhow, and he can't get volunteers. That was the main thing. Cannot get volunteers. So when I rang Murray, I told him all of that, and he said, leave that to me. And I remember we had an Irish announcer on TV at the time, and of course this came over from the Irishman, that at the moment in the Suez Gully area, ex-Abermain, there is this huge fire, and it's reported that it looks, if the wind changes, it'll destroy homes, and volunteers are not forthcoming. So I got a pair of overalls on, grabbed the GLAMx and just 100 feet of film, loaded the thing, walked out. I had a 55 Chev at the time, I remember, got in the Chev. I was backing it out of my yard and had to stop because my neighbour was backing out. So anyway, we sorted that out, and the next thing I got going down. When I got down to the old West End picture show, I went to get on the main Wallamby Road, all the lights were coming. And I thought, I'm in a damn hurry if someone can just stop and let me go. Keeping on, I bet it took a quarter of an hour. So when finally I got to go, I'm in this line of traffic. Surely they're going to pull off at wherever, you know. But they all went my way, and they all ended up exactly where I wanted to. Those were the volunteers. So this fireman whom I knew was with this policeman who was the Abermain policeman. And I was walking up behind them, the 2 of them were together walking up this bit of a hill, and the policeman said, I wish I knew who called all these B volunteers. And Bob, the fireman, he just sort of hushed me, don't own up to it. And then as I was leaving, having shot a bit of footage of it, and it was a big fire, but it all happened well, didn't burn any homes. I walking along the road to get into my car, which was parked quite a long way away, due to the amount of folk. They were sightseers, they weren't there to help, they were sightseers. A bloke pulled up, he said, I've just come from Newcastle. He had 4 44-gallon drums of water in a trailer. He said, I've brought this up to see if it can be helpful. Yeah, he was a volunteer. Yeah. But the graduation ceremonies at Cessnock Airport, well, of course, they taught cadets how to fly planes, and then every now and again there'd be a graduation. And I covered a fair few of those. There was the use of the bullock team to load a huge log onto a timber jingle, which I've spoken about. The opening of GLAMx, which I spoke about the ABC covering with about 4 or 5 people. And then Allendale Bowling Green. So that's the sort of thing. Opening of Allendale Hospital Bowling Green by Mr. Jago. He was then the health minister. Opening of Millfield Workers Club Bowling Green, story about the winning of the No. 2 pennant, and then the Wallamby bicentennial reenactment and celebrations. That made me feel quite insecure, that. Pilgrims, well, I don't know about pilgrims, but in the Wallamby Cemetery there is a well-known poet buried, and these people went out to pay homage as such. So NBN knew about it, and they asked me to go out and shoot a couple of shots, which was all it was, around the headstones and stuff. But Anzac Day, I did that each year. And night trotting, they used the first mobile start. Aggregate meeting from the miners, that sort of thing. On another day, I apparently delivered film, or just went to see the night. I love to go to NBN studios to say good day and catch up, And when I went into the newsroom, which was where I always headed because Jeff Greaves worked there, Murray Finlay was writing the news, and Murray Masterton was in his office, which was just to the side of the newsroom. So I knocked at the door. I said, "Can I speak to you for a minute, Murray?" "Yes, come in." So in I went. I said, "Look, do you think that a story about the chitter dumps, the burning chitter dumps around the Cessnock area would be valuable to you?" And he said, "What's a burning chitter dump?" And Murray Finlay turned around in his chair and he said, "Haven't you ever driven to Cessnock on a balmy night?" Because, of course, the refuse from the coal spontaneously combusted, burning, and, of course, these dumps were 4 miles long and sort of 8 feet high over a period of time, dumping, and they all lit up and no one did anything about them. And, of course, the amount of smoke and the dreadful smell, sulphuric smell that was coming from them, it just, at times you could look and see the difference between good air and the stuff, in Cessnock town. But anyway, Murray gave me permission to do that, and I shot film, but Jeff eventually took the job from me using my footage. But I was at a wedding shooting a wedding one night, and a girl came over. She said, "I'm going to be on TV." I said, "Oh, good on you, how's that?" She said, "Well, there's a man coming up on Monday from NBN with a sound camera and going to ask me about the chitter dumps." "Oh, is he?" So I rang Jeff and he said, "Look, we'll be paying you for all your jobs, and but we just need some sound on film to interview some of the people who live near these." So that was quite good, This particular time I took a month-long service leave so that I could catch up on my photographic backlog, which was huge. So I had some photographs that I needed the colorist to colour. So I took them over to her home, which was over the road from an engineering workshop. And unknown to me was one where one of my old school buddies worked. So when he saw me pull up, he came out and spoke about the vibrating screens that Frank Delaney's engineering had been working on for a number of months, which were being taken away today on trucks down to the wharves at Newcastle. And he said, I think that'd be a damn good story. So I said, well, I do too. And when I get back home, I'll give them a ring and see if they want me to shoot it. So when I rang, I got Murray Finlay on the phone, and he said, look, forget about that. He said, there's a lady coming up to the Baby Health Centre today. He said, I want you to go and shoot a few shots of her. Okay. So when the story got out that these Weeper, they were bound for Weeper Village with the bauxite, you see. So when the story got out about NBN not wanting it shot, Bob Brown, the mayor, got onto NBN and really gave them a blast. He said, this is a big thing for Cessnock. This engineering workshop's has won the tender and is making these things for Weeper Village. Big deal. So they said, oh, any more to be built? We'll come and do it. So the next time that they left from his workshop, I was sent to do the job. So I remember a young chap came over, and a young tall bloke, and he said, your camera? And I said, yes, it's my camera. I said, the footage that I use is NBN. He said, I was just going to offer you a job. He said, how would you like to come with us with these screens? We're going to reassemble them all on the wharf at Newcastle, run them, then load them onto the ship. You will come with us on the ship, up over the top, down to Weeper Village. And if it's money, you don't mention a figure, you say it at the time, we will pay it. He was working for Alice Chalmers.
So where's Weeper Village? Is that?
It's up over the Cape and down, right on, the little turret on the top of Oz.
Yeah. So
they're going up around the top and down in through there, and then they were going to assemble them, and they wanted me to do the whole job. But of course I couldn't. I said to him, I said, I can't do that. My wife and children at foster, and so. But anyway, that got on the air, and everyone Bob Brown was happy, of course, and I got the £3 to do the job. Thing that round about August, September, the mine, I was sort of a bit official in the union movement. I was the secretary at Saxon Vale for my last, I think, 7 years of work. And of course with that comes a little bit of going up to the office and doing stuff up there and whatever. So being a photographer, they'd asked me to shoot the shots, still shots, of the Memorial Day, which is called the Jim Comerford Memorial Wall Day. Now, on brass plaques at the office, out in the open, are the names of all those who have been killed in coal mines. And they had them, fortunately not many at a time now, but they had them as the person is killed. So normally the guest of honour would be a parliamentarian, and we've had 007 up there, and quite a number of other people. Julia's been there, and others. But so anyhow, I shoot those. But when I go there, I look for the girl who's handing out the programs, because there it is all itemised. I can acquaint myself then with the what's going to happen. The minister will provide a little bit of a talk, and etc. And I knew what and it's just a matter of shooting the job, and it all is sequential and stuff.
Oh, Barry, thank you so much. It's just been really great information. So
it's a privilege, Anne.